example, imagine that I define justice as giving people what belongs to them. Now, a modern-day Socrates would then ask the following questions as exceptions. Would it be justice to give an axe murderer his axe back? Right? Or would it be justice to give your drunk friend his car keys? And most people I talk to, 99.9%, would say, well, no, that's not justice to me. So Socrates' questioning has helped us see that your opinion of justice is not your real opinion. And in fact, when you use the Socratic method, you'll find that what you think of justice and what I think of justice is actually very similar.
So what we're doing with Socrates, and we'll do it on Wednesday with Plato, they're both rationalists, and they think that you have certain innate ideas in you, and if we just probed enough, those ideas would suddenly pop out. Plato on Wednesday is going to say, well, what's the difference between true and false belief? What is a belief? Is a belief real? Is a belief an assumption? Is a belief grounded in any reality at all? The boogeyman lives under the bed. And once we get past false and true belief, is there a difference between knowing and knowledge? And how do we know when we finally arrived at a truth? And most of us never spend any time thinking about that. Remember we said that the people who, you remember the very first week, what's the best use of philosophy? Anybody remember? People who study philosophy get jobs more than anyone else do. Critical thinking. It teaches people how to think through presumptions to get to assumptions that might clear away all the clutter of thinking until we get to something that we would call foundational. That's why we call it foundationalism, okay? Now, do we ever arrive? Again, with Socrates, Socrates said no. But we can get closer and closer and closer. When we get to Plato on Wednesday, Plato's going to say, oh yeah, we can arrive. And he's going to make certain presumptions you can't prove. But they're fascinating because they force us to sit down and think, people. And philosophy is nothing more than thinking, sitting down and trying to come to the fundamental concepts that cause us to form a knowledge of the world that's around us. If we start with faulty assumptions, we're going to end up with faulty knowledge about what the world's about. Everybody thought the world was flat. Turns out the world wasn't flat. Descartes thought because I can think, therefore I must exist, so if I can think, it must be true. Well, Descartes might have thought the world was flat. That didn't make it true. So he's starting with the assumption that may be valid and may not be valid. And so what philosophy is going to try and do is get us to tease out all of those assumptions. And it always starts with knowledge. Look, you may not understand the world you live in, but you can have knowledge of the world you live in. But what kind of knowledge do you have? And does the nature of that knowledge make any difference at all in the way you go about your day, in the way about you formulate your future? I had a gentleman 2 classes ago, was a young man, said to me, he says, you know, I've been trying to figure out maybe where my life has gone astray. I feel like I'm not really making progress, and I just want you to kind of run some things by me. And I listened to him for a while, and I said, well, try this out. I said, it takes a while for coffee to percolate. Sometimes in life, you just need to let things percolate. I said, in many ways, life is like the ocean, too. It comes in and it goes back out. It's not a constant. Every once in a while, you need to pause, because life will cause you to pause if you want to walk with life. Pausing is a part of it. We have built-in pauses. For some of us, it's meditation, it's reflection. There's built-in pauses that come along with life. You've all been there, whether you've sat down and really, thought that out or not. I said, you know how a boat goes from point A to point B if it's strictly using wind? The nautical term we call is tacking. It'll get to B. Left, right, left, right, left. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, in some ways you really are a Taoist. Well, we'll get to Taoism in a little bit. Life is like a river flowing. I said, well, in some ways it is. The wind blows, we feel its presence, we don't know where it comes from and where it's going. If you just let the wind guide you, you might end up at point B eventually, but you're going to have to go this way. And if you fight that, you'll never get where you're going. And that happens with a lot of presumptions that we have. We think we're on the right track and boom, we hit this wall and we can't figure out what happened. Well, we started with the wrong presumptions. Look, that's not right or wrong. It's just a matter of learning along the way. That's all knowledge is about, is learning how to distinguish between false belief, true belief, knowing and knowledge. How do you know that you know that you know that you know? And philosophy just tries to help us answer those questions. And while it may not seem relevant today, it is extremely relevant to your life. I imagine all of you are here because you've kind of set a course, trying to go from here to there. I mean, some people may just be in school to be in school, but I have a feeling most of you are in school because you've kind of set out a course. And that's how life works, of course. And you'll make mid-course corrections. In your life, you'll make 5. We know that psychologically. When you go from being child dependent to a young adult, either in your late teens, or you'll make your first life's decisions. Ready to go out on your own. You get to be 30, 35 or so, you look back and go, no, this isn't quite where I intended to be at this time, so you make a mid-course correction. I have a boy right now, would love to be an engineer. He does insurance for Standard Insurance. He'd be a great engineer. Doesn't have the money to go back to school, but he knows he would do much better as an engineer. Then you get to be in your mid-50s, your late 50s, and you realize you have one more chance ahead of you. And you quit looking back, you start looking forward. How do I want my life to end? What do I want as I get to the end of my life? What am I really looking for? And you begin to ask those same assumptions you did when you started out now. Some of the greatest thinkers started real late in life. After they had a little bit under their belt, they sat down and thought, you know, got to be something a little bit, I don't know how to put it, more maybe, or, and they make fundamental changes and they arrive someplace where they're finally comfortable. And that's really at the heart of philosophy. I can't emphasize that enough, people. And I know it sounds weird and it's, maybe you don't see the value in it. But that first fellow we saw the first day is right. All day long you are philosophizing. Our job is just to kind of help you fine-tune the skills. Well, I can't figure out why this is going on. Well, let's start with how you got here. Maybe your presumptions were wrong. But everybody can get to where they're going, people, if you know where you're going. And then you can get there. So Socrates gives us this great insight. Understanding and knowing begins with questions. What am I doing here anyway? I mean, don't you, maybe you do, I do, I ask myself every period, what am I still doing in Florida? I mean, does Florida hold some aura for me, you know? No, not really. It's way too hot in the summer. But then being in Florida isn't about being in Florida. Why are you here in this class? Why are you involved in the things you're involved in? And there's nothing right or wrong. There's nothing that upsets that card. It's just questions that may prove valuable so that the next step unfolds in front of you and you have some understanding of what you're doing, why you're going from here to there. You listen to one of those fellows, the same fellow on one of those first videos. Most of us start out, and if our parents are religious, we go to church, and then we get older, and or whatever the religious institution is, and then we stop going. We get interested in other things. But then you have children and you realize maybe life is more than just my interest. Now I've got this little one, I have to deal with it. Maybe you go back, maybe you don't. And that all comes from asking fundamental questions about what is the meaning of life. Is this all there is? Or is there more? Athletes, they come to a certain stage in life where that first plan is running out of time. My favorite, I told you I went to college on a tennis scholarship, Roger Federer. 18 major championships, 35 years old, hasn't won in 4 years. No one thought Roger would win again. Roger didn't think he'd win again. Reached down in a little basket and something came up Sunday and he beat a very good Spaniard, Rafael Nadal, who's won 14. And he's at the end of his career now. Roger, what are you going to do? Well, I have to think about it. Yeah, I hope you do. Quality decision, you can do what you want to do. And hopefully that's what you're doing here too, people. Making use of philosophy. I really hope, and I'll end with that, I really hope that philosophy is just not a class you got to get through because it's part of your AA degree. While you're here, take time to use the tools that are being given to you. I have no agenda with you. It's none of my business. But these could be very valuable tools. You may not use them now. You may come to an awareness of them 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. I don't know. But they can be very valuable to you. Business knows that, but business isn't the be-all and end-all. It's just another tool to get from here to there. And it could be a very valuable time that we spend together. Any questions for me? Okay. Well, if you came in late, let me know you're here. Wednesday, very serious about Plato and Aristotle, okay? I will see you on Wednesday.